The frightened woman woke up as from a nightmare, and the first thing she saw was, here is the shortcut to fortune. He too got a big doll made, put it in the arms of his wife and left her in the jungle. As he spread his treasures on the floor and sorted them out, he riches. Now, these are the people who have robbed from somebody else, and here is a woman who is robbing them. The neighbor was curious to know what these poor people had that day to measure in such haste. Hello, hi, namaste, and welcome to Vidhyaashram, first grade college, the temple of excellence. I am Nandakishore, Faculty of English in Vidhyaashram, MYSURU. In my previous session, I had discussed about the prose which is prescribed to first semester BA and BCA, MYSURU University. The prose is titled as The Clay Mother-in-Law. Before I go ahead in session 2, in today's session, let me just give you a recap about the previous session. Here in session 1, there is a character, a daughter-in-law, who always remained obedient, and she always had a doubt about how much share of rice to prepare for her daughter-in-law and her husband. And she always took commands and orders from her daughter-in-law, who never crossed the boundaries, and she remained obedient throughout. But one day, her mother-in-law passed away, and she had nobody to instruct her how much rice to cook now. And she went on to ask her husband, and he was completely fed up. So what he decides was, he goes to the potter and requests him to prepare the life size of his mother and gets it home, where his wife feels very happy. And she goes on to look at the idol or the doll and starts preparing rice. If she happens to prepare 2 cups of rice, it was fine, but somehow the doll had the hands with 2 fingers and the other hand with 3 fingers. If she happens to look at 2 hands or 2 fingers, then she would go on preparing 2 cups. Or if she happens to look at the hand which is 3 fingers shown, then she went on to prepare 3 cups of rice or 3 seer of rice. And later, somehow, the husband gets to know that she is imbecile. So later, her husband gets to know that she is looking at his mother idol and preparing the rice, and he gets angry and he beats up and he puts out his wife along with the doll. Carrying this doll, the mud mother-in-law, the woman reaches the forest and she climbs up, where that night she looks at the robbers who are trying to move towards the same tree where she has climbed, and they come and settle down after a heavy day and decide to disperse or distribute equally amongst themselves the loot which they had looted from the rich people. At the right moment, out of fear, she drops the clay mother-in-law, the doll, and she falls with a heavy noise. And all the thieves, they run helter-skelter, and she falls unconscious on the same branch. Now let us see what happens in today's session. Day dawned, right? Dawn and dusk. Dawn, sunrise. The frightened woman woke up as from a nightmare, and the first thing she saw was on the forest floor was her clay mother-in-law in 3 pieces amid countless treasures and some extinguished torches. Now she sees that her mother-in-law pot, right? The pottery, the idol, it is done. It has fallen on the floor with 3 pieces. It could be asked for 1 mark, 3 pieces. After making sure that there was no one nearby, she gingerly climbed down. She carefully climbed down and gathered up her precious mother-in-law, who was now in 3 pieces. She prayed to her dear departed with fervent devotion for having saved her in calamity and for having presented her with an undreamt of treasure to boot. In the sense, the treasure is lying right in front of her, right on her feet, under the feet. And she says that, thank you so much, my mother-in-law. And then it goes on. A few hours later, the furious husband saw his wife at his door again with a broken doll in one arm and an odd-looking bundle in another. Now, he's very furious again. He scolded her at first for coming back, but soon learned of the precious fortune she had brought. Now, she has brought the fortune. What is that fortune? She has carried all the loot from forest to her house. Hastily, very hurriedly, he dragged her inside the house and heard the story in all its details. His eyes nearly popped out with amazement when he saw the rubies and the jewels in the bundle. He kept them all aside safely. With her help, he found his way to the forest, bundled up all the remaining loot, and secretly brought home valuables worth a kingdom. That's how rich it was. Now, somehow, with her help, both of them carry the loot. They dig up, they hide the bundle, and remaining will be brought back home. As he spread his treasures on the floor and sorted them out, he was seized with a desire to estimate it all. Now he wants to count, to know how much he was worth on that day of grace. He sent his wife to the neighbor's house to borrow a measuring vessel, which she obediently procured. She listens, okay, and then she goes to her neighbor and she asks for measuring vessel. What we call is seru. It is sort of like, a sort of a vessel where we measure the rice as well, right? Measure and pour. A tumbler, a sort of a tumbler here. And then the neighbor was curious to know what these poor people had that day to measure in such haste. Always the neighbor's curious. So he stuck a piece of tamarind at the bottom when he lent his seer. Now who is it? The husband, not the wife. But in the session 1, you get to know that the wife who took the rice, the meal from the leaf. Measuring vessel. When the measure was returned to him after its use was over, the neighbor and his wife were dumbfounded with amazement to see a brilliant gem. Remember, they have stuck a tamarind under the bottom of the seer, the vessel, and after measuring, one of the gems was stuck under it, and looking at it, the neighbors are dumbstruck now and question all possibilities in the hope of puzzling out the mystery of their neighbor's fabulous wealth. He was nearly penniless yesterday, but overnight he had amassed a treasure enough to be measured by the seer. Now he is like wondering, my God, forget about having a gem. Now they are measuring it with seer. They have become so rich. What was it? How did he do it? How did he become so rich? The mystery deepened as they thought about it. And then the neighbor set his wife on the trial of mystery. Now, these neighbors, they always have this curiosity what the neighbors, the other home or the other people, the next door would be doing. And she questioned the guileless young woman, like guileless who was not so deceptive, who cannot cheat, very meek. Young woman at the first opportunity, the witless woman poured out a breathless tale of all her wondrous adventures, how she was driven out and how she stayed in a tree with her mother-in-law and all the rest of it, and ended by saying that all their wealth was the fruit of her mother-in-law's grace. Now, she says that this is what had happened. My husband beat me and I was like a foolish woman. I went to the forest, I cried, I wept, I asked somebody to come and kill me, take away my life, but after I climbed up the tree, this is what happened, and this is how we have become rich today. The clever neighbor knew better than to believe in devoting herself to her dead mother-in-law. Her husband thought that here was a shortcut to fortune. Remember, this line is very important. Here is the shortcut to fortune. He too got a big doll made, put it in the arms of his wife, and left her in the jungle. He threatened her that he would never take her back into the house unless she brought her husband as much fortune as the neighbor's wife had done. Now he's asking, it is a comparison one will have for sure. See, we do this a lot, right? When one of our friends, especially amongst our friends group, if any one of our friends happen to buy a super bike or super car, even we want to have one. And we can go to any extent to convince our parents. That's what the mentality of students these days. But when I extend it a bit more, the neighbors clash. Though they smile at each other, though they pretend that they are in good terms, they always have something in their mind deep down. It would tell, yes, it always does, that we need to live a better life compared to our neighbors. So this is the logic, this is the psychology, and this is exactly what is happening in the neighbors' mentality as well. Now this woman was confident of her plans and had thought out the strategy carefully. As expected, the same thieves with torches in hand came there after their day's wicked work to share the loot under the tree. The same occurrence, the same thieves. Hardly did they untie their bundles when the woman on the tree threw down a doll into their midst. So she is going to throw down. She knows what had happened the previous night and she wants to do the same thing today. There was a terrific crash. At once, the thieves took to their heels, but their suspicions were aroused. They knew that somebody has planned even today and they are going to catch hold of the thief now. The first night, they were caught unawares. They didn't know what had happened. They ran helter-skelter and they never returned. But today, they are sure that they are going to catch hold of this person or anybody who is causing the trouble for them. But on the second night, they resolved to get to the root of the matter. So they hid themselves behind the tree trunks. They didn't run away. They hid themselves. So what happens now? To their great chagrin, embarrassment, they saw a woman alighting from the tree. Alighting is torching the light, also getting down the tree. Getting down the tree, from the tree, and robbing them of their hard-won riches. Now, these are the people who have robbed from somebody else. And here is a woman who is robbing them. With shouts of anger, they closed in upon her, scolded her heartily for having scared them out of their treasure the night before. They are talking about the night before, and they are thinking it is the same lady, even today, who has come to steal from us. Beat her till she was quite blue and faint, and left her tied up to the tree. Now, they beat her black and blue, yes, and they not only beat her, they also tied her up to the tree. The clever neighbor found next day, very nearly crazed with fear, very much the worse of her night's treasure hunt, but none the richer. She had lost her life, a sort, yes, and she has lost everything now. Remember the instruction which was given by her husband? He would not accept his wife, this woman, if she doesn't return to home with this loot. But did she return? She didn't. So that is about the pros. It is simple story, folklore. Yes, the folk tales. And there is a good message which is given by the author, and it tells that we should never compare. We should not compare ourselves with anybody and think that, we want to live a better life, we want to be like them, then we would lose our identity. Exactly the same way how the neighbor lost her identity. Let us next see the previous year's questions. Which were the questions that the daughter-in-law asked every morning in the clay mother-in-law? Like, how much seer of rice to prepare? Right? How many cups of rice to prepare? Who stole the food cooked by the daughter-in-law? Neighbor's wife. Neighbor's wife. These two carry 1 mark each, and a third one carries 10 mark. Here is the question. How does the clay mother-in-law ridicule the greedy? It is mocking at the greediness. How does it mock at? How does one shouldn't be greedy? Right? It is sort of ridiculing, making fun of about being greedy. Why it makes fun of? The pros, the clay mother-in-law. So that is it about today's session. I'm going to meet you in my next session with new topic, yet another topic. Until then, keep reading. Have a good day. Take care.